IceWatch, and they label it as this grassroots organization. They have a whole system, a whole network, where they have people having spreadsheets of license plate numbers. If that license plate turns out, yes, we've seen them doing activity before, this is an ICE agent, they get more people following that person. And so that's how you end up with Renee Good. You see how we had so many angles of that video. Same thing with Alex Preddy. Obviously, it's very upsetting to see what happens to Renee Good, see what happened to Alex Preddy. What happens is it becomes this whole emotional thing, and it blows up all over the country, and then your average American is questioning immigration enforcement as a whole.
Welcome back to Problematic Women, where it is not wrong to be right. I'm your host, Elise McHugh, and for my last ever Problematic Women episode, for now, I am so excited to have Brecca Stoll, today's news reporter for the Daily Wire, here to talk with me today about your amazing reporting. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming.
No, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, so Daily Wire, Daily Signal, Daily Caller, we all get confused. Daily Mail, so many dailies. How did you end up at the Daily Wire? Because I've been following them since high school, middle school. It's always been one of my top consumed news sites. How did you end up at the Daily Wire?
So it's a fun story, but basically I was actually working in New York in finance, and I always knew I wanted to be a reporter, and I had this mentor in DC tell me that if I really wanted to fast track my career, I should move down to Washington because they take young people seriously, they promote people quickly, and that's what I did, and I followed his advice, met my boss, and then it just worked out, and they decided to give me a chance.
Oh my gosh, that's so fun. That's such a change going from New York finance to Washington, D.C. What's the biggest difference you would say as a young person in their career, between the two cities?
I would say New York. I mean, obviously it's bigger, but honestly, it's mainly the government, just how I'm here. And the government basically just moves this entire economy. It's behind everything. And New York, you're up there and you don't think about Washington very much. You're doing your job. You're not thinking about the effects of everything. So it's so cool to be in the Capitol and actually see just the impact that everything has in here. And then it makes you realize just how much Washington does affect everything. So all these regulations, all these little pieces of legislation they pass, they can actually influence your daily life, but you forget about it. And I think the majority of Americans, in cities in New York and all over the world aren't really paying attention. And then, this tiny place in the District of Columbia is making rules that actually influence everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really interesting how you said that people in New York don't think about the effects of Washington politics on them. I want to dive into that later because you have some great reporting about what's going on in New York. But I did want to first ask you about some of your great reporting just around the country. I was first put on notice of your amazing reporting because you had some viral videos in Minnesota, in Minneapolis, after the shooting of Renee Good. Tell me a little bit about that experience.
So I found out I was going to Minneapolis the morning Renee Good was shot. And so the next thing I know, I'm out on a plane and we're covering everything that's going on in there. We didn't know if it was going to be the George Floyd riots or what to expect. And so we get out there, and I'm actually so glad to have gone out there and just see what was going on the ground, talking to protesters, talking to people in Minneapolis, because I don't think we're done with news coming out of Minneapolis.
You don't think we're done? Because it's kind of hush-hush right now. Why do you think we're not done?
Because I've been following the Minneapolis City Council and how I talk about how, places in Washington, D.C., how it affects rules everywhere. The same thing is these rules that the Minneapolis City Council passes also has ripple effects. And so I've been watching them today, they're actually debating whether they're going to pass or renew liquor licenses for 2 hotels suspected of housing ICE agents. And so basically it's the Canopy Hotel and the Hilton Hotel. And, by law, they followed all their requirements to get their liquor license renewed. But the City Council is saying that because they may have housed ICE agents, that should be under question.
Oh my goodness.
And so that's happening today. And this is, a month after Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and it's this stuff like this keeps happening. Even though we've seen, ICE agents pull out of there, the end of Operation Metro Surge. And so they keep making news and they keep staying into these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's no idea, we have no idea that this is going on, and it's no question as to why it trickles down into just the people and the craziness that we experience there. I mean, you had that great video where you were talking to a McDonald's worker who was denying food to the ICE agents. Tell me about your experience just talking to the Minnesotans, the Minneapolis people.
So I think to kind of understand how that even happens is you kind of have to look at the whole picture. And it's something I realized when I got back. And so basically what's going on is you have this thing called IceWatch, which I'm sure you've heard of. But like for people who don't know, is IceWatch, and they label it as this grassroots organization. And so what they do is they basically can track like ICE agents' license plates. They have a whole system, a whole network where they have people having spreadsheets of license plate numbers. And so what will happen is someone will be doing patrols and they'll be like, hey, I see this vehicle on, Portland Avenue. The license plate is this. And they'll send it back through their signal chat. And someone with a spreadsheet will check the license plate and see if it's an ICE agent or just log it to get confirmation later if it's an ICE agent. And so they're tracking everything. And the reason why they do that is because if, that license plate turns out, yes, we've seen them doing activity before, this is an ICE agent, they get more people following that person. And so that's how you end up with Renee Good. You see how we had so many angles of that video. Same thing with Alex Preddy. And if you look, whenever you see just pictures from Minneapolis, like I saw one of a woman in a bathrobe in her slippers. That's how quickly these people are being mobilized. So if they see ICE agents here, they all run to the scene. And what happens is you get all this footage, and obviously it's very upsetting to see what happened to Renee Good, see what happened to Alex Preddy. Very upsetting. Majority of Americans, I would hope, don't want to watch that video, don't like seeing that. And so what happens is it becomes this whole emotional thing, and it blows up all over the country. And then, your average American is questioning immigration enforcement as a whole. And so this is planned because what funds IceWatch, what I've seen are these two organizations. It's Defend the 612 and States at the Core. I've looked into States at the Core. They are basically part of this nonprofit with the Hopewell Fund. Hopewell Fund, their parent organization is Arabella Advisors. That's when you see, the George Soros Fund. Yes. I literally was looking at an article the other day, and it was saying Arabella Advisors, the godfather of the left's dark money. So all this stuff is connected. And when I looked into the three people kind of leading the States at the Core, they all met at this other nonprofit. They had George Soros connections, and they've all joined in to help, organize Minneapolis. And the woman, her name is Jill, I forget, I'm blanking on her last name, but the one who's kind of organizing the States at the Core, she does these IceWatch trainings. And so she trains all these people to basically cover all the ICE activity and how to video, and just gives them different advice. And so they can be there, over all the time they're doing their operations and find those moments of, Renee Good, Alex Preddy, and then take that video and then put it all over the country and make everybody question the Trump presidency.
Absolutely. It's so astroturfed, just hearing how organized it can be, and just like they know that it's going to attack your emotions. I mean, even some people at like my own church and very conservative community, but some people are really just questioning like, hey, is this a moral thing to do because it made me feel uncomfortable? But then you think, okay, what's the alternative? You are also being put in a weird spot when you have people who are here illegally, who are not being deported, who are actually causing harm to American citizens. But you don't hear the coverage of that because there's no organized way to exemplify that in the media. And you don't want to, because that's like really bad stuff. But what do you think is the end goal for these people in Minneapolis?
I'm glad you asked that. So I was watching a video of her being interviewed, the woman, Jill, and she said, the interviewer asked her, when did you get started? When did you start States at the Core? And she says, when I realized Trump was going to get elected. And then she said, because I knew we would need to organize activists, organize resistors. And so she sees, okay, Trump's getting elected this time. We need to organize this whole movement so we can be ready. And you see the same thing, 2020 with the George Floyd riots and everything going on. Because it's like this, and it does feel like chaos. And it does feel like riots. And then you look under the Biden administration, it's like you're not seeing as many riots. You're not seeing as many protests. And so when she said, when I knew Trump was being elected, I really think she's organizing to get kind of this manufactured chaos to get ready for midterms and then 2028.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember one of the videos that you posted that I thought was quite funny was when you were talking to that woman who was just so distraught. And she said, I don't know if my white tears are helpful. So obviously on the higher level, they're resisting Trump. That's always their goal. You can substitute whatever the issue of the day is, but it's to resist Trump. But for these people on the ground who are so concerned about like their white tears and their emotions, like when do you think they'll stop?
You know, I think as long as Democratic lawmakers, use this rhetoric and use, these things that you need to, pay reparations to people. You need to, you need to like do all these types of things. I think it will continue because when I talked to that woman, I was so surprised, but I could tell she genuinely felt bad that she was a white woman. And she wasn't sure if she could come to another white woman's memorial because, like she said, her white tears may not be as valuable as, Hispanic tears, brown tears. And the reason why she feels that way is because of what her lawmakers and what people are telling her. So I think as long as people continue to do that, these people will feel that way.
It must be so suffocating to be a leftist, like having to stick to all these rules all the time. And it honestly makes the conservative outrage over the like midterm elections and all the special elections last year look like a nothing burger because it's actual chaos going on in Minnesota, Minneapolis, and what these people are being poisoned in their minds with. But I do kind of want to switch back to the conservative outrage because even though it looks a little silly in retrospect, it is still pretty justified. And we are seeing the effects of, conservatives heeding their warning about Zohran Mamdani in New York City. And now that he is mayor, he's been there for like what, a month?
Yes.
A literal month, 1 month. And it is already chaos. And we were heeding warnings about him. He's in power. What's going on there? It's insane.
Okay, so this week, I posted on X, I was like 2 days to reversals. And basically his first reversal was he ran this whole campaign on joy. And this reporter asking him about his budget that he was projecting said it best. He said, you're showing this budget, you ran this campaign on joy, but there's not a lot of joy in this room right now. And the reason there wasn't a lot of joy in that room is because he was talking about raising property taxes by about 9.5%.
And property taxes on the working class, not the 1% like he said.
Yes, exactly. And so because how he got elected was he said, we're going to raise taxes on the wealthy. But to do that, he needs New York Governor Kathy Hochul. And Kathy Hochul, it's an election year for her. She says, I'm not doing that. And so Mamdani is forced with this reality that he knew could be the possibility the whole time. And so his only option, because it's mandated by New York law to balance the budget, to balance his budget, he has to raise property taxes. And then what happens is, and he even said it himself, he's not denying it, this is a tax on working class, middle class people. And he says he doesn't want to do that and it's his last option, but that's the reality that they're going to be faced with.
It's so tough too, because if you saw the election breakdown of who voted for who, it was like working class families who voted not for Mamdani. It was like the New York University students and the transplants who all voted for him. So do you think that Mamdani voters are regretting their vote, or do you think, hey, I'm not being affected by it, I don't really care?
No, I'm seeing backlash already. And you start seeing it from it's other Democratic council members, and they're saying you can't raise property taxes. Mamdani's comptroller, this is the person who, in charge of the city's finances, has a lot of say there. He said raising property taxes would have dire consequences. So people are pushing back on this already. And also property taxes hasn't been raised since 2003.
Yeah. And it's so interesting. I was looking up the numbers on this. So he also increased the budget from 115 to 127.
Yes.
And for comparison, the entire state of Florida's spending budget is $115 billion. Like, a little tiny city. I know New York is very influential and is very populated, but compared to an entire state, like, what is going on with that? I can't believe it.
So you have to think about how this would happen, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, you have Eric Adams. He's doing it at $115 billion. Then Mamdani says he needs $127 billion. And you're like, where's the $12 billion coming from? And so I've emailed Mamdani's press office and would wish I had a comment that I could get from them to tell you today. But they haven't responded, because I said, where is this extra money coming from? But, just looking at New York in general, what you notice is they had they're a sanctuary city. So they had influx of migrants come in. And, they converted hotels to house migrants. They gave them prepaid food on credit cards or debit cards.
Yeah.
There's a lot of services that just increased. And so from what I can tell, and I'm sure inflation plays a part of it too, why you need more money. But I do think they are having to pay for having a sanctuary city, and they need more money. And that's what I think he's not telling New Yorkers.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's crazy. You got out of New York like right in time. Do you think the finance world is like majorly panicking right now because of this?
At the end of the day, New York, and they talk about how the 1% will flee New York. Same thing with like California, they'll all go to Florida. And I think some people will leave. But at the end of the day, New York is still, the financial hub of the world, arguably the most important city in the entire world.
Yeah.
And there's no place like it. And so I do think them being squeezed, like I don't think the wealthy, they can still take being squeezed. Who it really will hurt is Mamdani's supporters and his voters, the people who are making, in between, 100, 150,000, because it's like that's where they will see they can't afford much. Maybe they'll never be able to buy a car again. Maybe they won't ever be able to buy a house. And so those are the people who I could also see leaving. And then the people who get stuck are the people who can't afford to leave.
Absolutely. And you had a really interesting conversation with one of the other mayoral candidates, Curtis Sliwa. He is a native New Yorker. He very much cares about the city. I mean, he started the Guardian Angels to like protect people on the subway. Like he is the type of person who I think this is going to affect. I mean, obviously he's a politician. He has more wealth than just like your average like blue collar worker. But tell me about your conversation with him about the state of New York these days.
So when we're seeing all the headlines of all the trash on the streets, we're seeing feces on the street. We're seeing, the homeless death toll rising to 18. I think it's up to 20. We had to call Curtis Sliwa because we're like, what is going on here? Is this all because of Mamdani? And I really liked his take because he talked about how the winter was so brutal. And to be honest, he said that no one he doesn't know what more a mayor could have done to prepare for that kind of winter. And so that was interesting because this man has been a New Yorker his whole life. And so for him not to say this is all Mamdani's fault, but just that the fact is it is one of their coldest winters since 2003. There's only so much salt you can put on the sidewalk to keep the snow piles. That was really interesting. But what he did say he didn't like that Mamdani was doing was not forcing the homeless off the streets. And that was when I said, he's had 2 reversals. This was his second policy reversal. He said, we're not going to touch encampments. We're going to let the homeless stay on the streets. But the problem is, and what Curtis Sliwa told us, who, has been volunteering with the homeless for many years, is they won't get off the streets. And they won't get off the streets because in these homeless shelters, they could have what few belongings they have stolen from them.
It's very dangerous to be there.
Yes. And also, they're not mentally there. So they don't even understand when you're going up to them and saying you need to go. So that is why he said they won't leave. And then Mamdani just let them stay. And unfortunately, you see a lot of people suffered. And then some people did die on the streets of New York.
It's not the kind and compassionate thing to just let people do what they want when they don't have their wits about them. And seeing some of the Band-Aid solutions that Mamdani proposed and then even tried and it failed, like converting city buses into warming stations, but then they couldn't find them because, it's not a good idea. And if they're even mentally there, and it's just like seeing in practice all the things that we knew weren't going to work. It's kind of like, okay, I told you so. But then it's also like, well, people are suffering. At what cost? So, I mean, were there any bits from your conversation with Curtis Sliwa that really stuck out to you? Because something that stuck out to me was something that he said. He said, I'm watching emotionally disturbed persons and homeless people exhibit Darwinian traits, survival of the fittest. That really stuck with me. Was there anything that you took away from that was really special?
Yes, just hearing how bad the homeless crisis has gotten. And, because what he said when he was talking about the Darwinian traits, he found a homeless man who had half a foot left. And he said the stronger homeless take from the weaker homeless. Oof. And so they stole his special shoe that he had and his normal shoe. And now he's out there with nothing in the cold. And it just shows you. And then also he said that he is in the shelters. He's in and out of the shelters, Curtis is, seeing the situation, helping. And he didn't see the homeless outreach workers on the street. And he said Mamdani isn't in the shelters. Yeah. But if you're the mayor of the city and to fully understand a crisis on your hands, I do think you need to be in the shelters. And then for Mamdani to not do encampment sweeps, but then you see cities like Portland ramping those up. It's like, can you learn from other cities and see what works and then maybe, not have to learn the hard way?
Exactly. I mean, what do you think is next for New York then? Because this can't be sustained.
Yeah, I think basically what's going to happen is I think there's going to be some sort of compromise. I don't think property taxes are going to be raised 9.5%. I think because also Mamdani just endorsed Kathy Hochul. Kathy Hochul had endorsed Mamdani when he was mayor. They seemed to have a good relationship, and he was very careful with his comments in the press conference, being very appreciative to money that he or Kathy has given to the city. And so I think they will end up working out some sort of compromise. I suspect that maybe property taxes will increase, and then Kathy Hochul might foot the other part of the bill. They'll work something out. And then also will just be interesting to see is if this works and what happens after Mamdani's 4 years. Will New Yorkers have enough? Will they learn this lesson? And will other parts of America learn this lesson? Or will socialism continue to spread? I talked about the Minneapolis City Council. What's actually interesting about that is their majority leader and their minority leader on that council are Democratic socialists.
Of course.
So it's not even a two-party council.
All roads lead back to democratic socialism or like George Soros for these people, seriously.
Yes. And so what you see happening is this spread, and like you can understand why, because when Mamdani comes along to people who are suffering financially and he says, I'm going to give you a bunch of free stuff, it sounds great. But the problem is we've seen that doesn't work. And so if people can learn this lesson, then they might not have to deal with this all over the country. And then they won't see what will happen is you actually, taxes go up, cost goes up, and then you're suffering.
That is in part why I think Donald Trump wasn't so resistant to the idea of Mayor Mamdani and even is becoming buddies with him, because it's like, okay, you do your thing so we can make an example, and hopefully Americans all over the country witness this and have their wits about them to realize, okay, that was a failed experiment. Unfortunately, it's affecting New Yorkers, New York City natives, but it's a small place. So, like, I don't know. We'll see. Do you think people are going to learn from this?
So it's funny you said that you think that Donald Trump, because basically it lets New York run its experiment. Yeah, exactly. And I think it's such an important experiment to run, especially before these midterms, when affordability is such a big issue. And when you think about affordability and like why Republicans, this is on the ballot, this is, everything everybody's talking about, is because it really is a crisis. But I think majority of Americans don't understand how we got here. And so if you look back at 2020, Biden gets the economy from Trump. Inflation is low. Okay, inflation's at 1.4%. And then it starts ticking up. And to give Biden the benefit of the doubt, that economy was primed with 2 COVID stimulus packages. And so, that's increasing demand, that's pumping money into the system. And so right around like 3 months Biden's into office, he starts seeing inflation tick up. Now, instead of maybe putting water on that fire, he puts gasoline. And he passes the American Rescue Plan, which gives another stimulus checks to Americans all over the country, $1,400. You see people going to Gucci, not exactly what it was intended for. And so we're in that situation. And then you see inflation continuing to tick up, continue to happen, and they pass, the Inflation Reduction Act, which obviously doesn't decrease inflation. No. And they keep saying like things will get better. And that's how Trump, honestly, he won the election, is because Americans realized it wasn't getting better. And the reason why it's very different because now Democrats are saying when Caroline Leavitt goes in the White House and says economic numbers are good, people are saying it's the same thing as Karine Jean-Pierre saying they're good, because, Americans still aren't feeling it. But what Americans are still feeling is that cumulative inflation from the Biden administration that was, I think in total around 20%. And the difference is when Biden or when Karine Jean-Pierre said inflation, it's getting better. That wasn't due to anything the Biden administration or largely what they were doing because, they're putting restrictions on energy companies, which we know is basically dictates the prices of everything. And so they're, constraining supply while they're pumping money into demand. And so we know that's causing inflation. But then you see the Trump administration, they're making energy cheaper. They're having, repealing regulations. They're like, okay, we want our coal companies producing coal. Yeah. We also want our solar companies, making more solar panels, but we just want to unleash American energy. And so the policies that they're taking, it appears to actually be helping. But when the Biden administration was saying it was like, what do you mean? The only thing that's actually happening here is the Fed is hiking rates. Exactly. And that's how it's
you can't just say things and sprinkle on a little candy in a solution. Like that doesn't actually work. And that's something I really appreciate about, I think JD Vance has been really great on this messaging. He was talking to a bunch of factory workers in Pittsburgh, I believe, Pennsylvania, a month ago.
Yes.
And he was like, okay, guys, don't panic. The economy is good. It is on track to be good. You might not be physically feeling it now, but look at all these things that we are doing to set you up for success, not just in the next few months ahead of midterms, but also just the things that the Trump administration is setting up for the rest of our lives, hopefully. I mean, Trump accounts is a really big thing. Yes. And you just see, if you think about it, you're not just thinking with your heart, but thinking about the logistics of it. Trump administration is actually setting us up to be really good in the future. So don't be a panic in is basically their message. And I really appreciate that about them. But this is such interesting things that I have not even thought to dig into. And it's just, you're such a fount of knowledge on it. What is next for you at the Daily Wire? Any big stories coming up you can tease?
So I always try and follow what's going on financially just because that is my background and I enjoy that. And then just daily news, which is an exciting job to have because it's whenever something breaks, that's my job to cover it. Yeah. So every day I just kind of start and see what's going on. And then, you could start at 8 a.m. thinking it's a normal Wednesday. And then by 6 p.m. you're in Minneapolis.
Exactly. Has there been a story that you've thought was your favorite?
I like Trump accounts when you talked about that just because it is something that you don't see. And it's where it's okay, let's actually fix the problem at the front end. So everybody's talking about Social Security running out, people's retirements. But what's happened here is when you do Trump accounts for children, under 18, those accounts are preparing them for retirement. And so it's let's fix the problem at the beginning rather than having to fix it at the end.
Exactly. Well, Brecca, it's been so much fun having you. I'm so overjoyed that this got to be my last conversation for Now on Problematic Women. I feel I learned so much, but also it's just so much fun to see you again. How can we all follow you and your work?
I post on my X and then just all the stories on Daily Wire.
Okay, it's perfect. So we'll drop the links to those in the show notes. But Brecca, thank you so much for joining. And before you leave, I want to ask everyone the question of the week. Do you think Mamdani voters are regretting their votes or do you not realize how bad it is? I think we decided they don't realize how bad it is, but they will. But to you guys, what do you think about what's going on in New York broadly? Do you think Mamdani voters are regretting their vote for him for mayor? Do you think Curtis Sliwa is acting more like a mayor? I just want to know your thoughts on it. And we'll be reading, we'll be responding to them. And make sure you follow us on Instagram too for very Instagram-specific content where you can only get it there. Brecca, thank you so much for joining. And I'll see you guys sometime soon.